nervous, so thanks for letting me go first. I'm going to show you my attention getter now. Get you into this topic of autism. Here we go.
Hi guys.
For the first time in a decade, Sesame Street has introduced a new Muppet to the show, and she has autism.
Oh, who's this?
Still frozen.
This is our friend, Julia.
The show says writing Julia into the episode was a challenge.
Because with autism, it's such a range. There's so many different ways that autism affects people. And there's no way we could possibly show everything.
What's so funny?
Julia started as a character in one of the show's books, We're Amazing 123. She was such a hit, the series decided to include her.
When Big Bird asks Alan, what's autism? Alan answers, well, for Julia, it's this. And that's what's important.
There's things just a little differently in that Julia sort of way.
Julia's introduction is just another way that hit show promotes inclusion.
Julia is an amazing little character. She is not as verbal, but she expresses herself in different ways.
Nice to meet you, Nancy. Hello.
The show says Julia's presence will hopefully promote a better understanding of autism.
It feels a little better when we all play together. We can all be friends.
For InsideEditions.com, I'm Kelly Nealon.
All right, I'm here today to talk to you about autism. Autism is a spectrum disorder, which may be passed through genes, and regardless of the cause, I think it's important that teachers know how to benefit or how to work with autistic students so the whole classroom can benefit. All right, first a little bit of background about what the disease is. So you keep hearing this term in the research called spectrum disorder. Do you know that word spectrum? What does that mean?
That means like a wide variety of things.
Yes, it does. And so like I think of like the color spectrum. And so you might see someone with very high functioning autism on one end of the spectrum, and you may not even know they have autism, truthfully. And then on the other extreme, you might see someone who can't even vocalize. So that's a pretty severe form of it. It's called a pervasive developmental disorder because it affects so many facets of their life. Researchers have actually described folks on the low end of the spectrum as being mind blind, which I thought was pretty interesting. It's like they're blind to the idea that other minds exist. They think that their mind exists. Are you seeing that in your character? I just remembered that your book is about an autistic boy too. And sometimes this creates conflict because they don't understand why your mind isn't thinking like mine thinks. On the other end of the spectrum, though, you can see really unusual gifts come with autism, like maybe they're super advanced at math, or maybe they're a piano prodigy. And so sometimes they come with really cool gifts as well. Literally, the autistic brain looks different. I'm going to throw a lot of scientific terms at you. One is an abnormality in the limbic system. It's like their limbic systems are immature. They're waiting for something to kind of turn them on, activate them. Also, their cerebellum is unable to do its job, and literally the size of an autistic brain is bigger than a, quote, normal brain. So here's a little bit of what the limbic system does. It controls emotions. So this is why it's harder for autistic children to express their emotions, because their limbic system isn't exactly wired the same as ours. The cerebellum controls muscle activity, and I didn't know that about autism. So they might have trouble with movement, or they might have like spastic motions at times. So I was curious how many, you all of a sudden are hearing more and more about autism. In fact, this month is Autism Awareness Month. And it turns out 1 in 150 students or children have it. And I couldn't quite put my finger on what that number means until I thought about my own students. And I teach about 125 to 150 students a year. So that means 1 out of all my kids all my students might have it. And when I thought about it, I did have a student with a form of Asperger's last semester. And so statistically speaking, that's kind of true for what I've seen. However, they're seeing a spike in the number of cases. And so that led me to the question, why are we seeing so many cases? Scientists are starting to do research. They have for the last 10 years, in fact. And they're finding that there is a genetic link to it. I liked this analogy or metaphor. Any of you in instruments or play the instrument, orchestra? Okay, so they liken it to an orchestra where the genes are the instruments. And if everything is like going like it's supposed to go, the orchestra is going to produce this great sound. But if you have just one instrument off, say that kid who never came to practice, that squeaky tuba, he's going to set the whole song off, isn't he? And that's just like one gene can throw the whole structure off. And now they're finding that some of those genes might contribute to autism. So I think it works because it just shows how complex our genetic structure is and how complex the scientists' work is to uncover these genetic links. Okay, so in terms of the impact on schools, right? I'm a teacher, I care about schools, and so I'm thinking, okay, as more and more students with autism come through my door, I need to be prepared to help that kid. And what we're finding, because it's a spectrum disorder, what worked with, let's call him John, who I had last semester, what I found worked with John might not work with the next autistic student I have, because every case is so unique. So it's making me appreciate the work they're doing in the elementary schools, because that's probably who's seeing these autistic kids first, and all the therapy that these kids need in order to be successful later. And so John was very successful in my class, but I think it's because of all of the grooming that he got when he was littler. So I'm wondering what we're going to do in high school to continue that therapy for the kids who need it. It's pretty expensive. It takes occupational therapists and physical therapists and speech pathologists, and I'm not sure if our building is equipped right now with all those specialists. Also, you know, a big myth about autistic students is that they don't show empathy. And this was true with John last semester. He came across as really cold and indifferent. He never wanted to work in a group. And I'm learning that that's just how his exterior looks, but inside he has a lot of great emotions. And when I think back to his class, he was always the one that would stick around after a rough class and say, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry if I was the cause. You know, like, he was so nice. And so it makes me realize that that's a huge myth, that they can show empathy. They do feel emotions. They just have trouble expressing it to the rest of us. So we clearly have way more research to do, and we're working in the schools when it comes to these autistic kids. But as we're seeing with Sesame Street, right? I think the more that society becomes aware of autism, the more that we'll become better at integrating them into society. So, to sum up my thesis, while scientists don't know definitively what causes autism, it is a spectrum disorder with so many different types. And as we see more and more cases, it's important that the schools be aware of the spectrum disorder so we're prepared to meet the needs of all students. Okay.